This question gets asked of us numerous times. The question is always, do we remodel this current house or do we move? This happens almost all the time where we're looking at a substantial remodel project. That remodel happens, it's going to cost you $100,000 and you have this much invested into your house already. Does it make sense to do that remodel or should we just move and roll the dice? In 2023, this is an even bigger question because interest rates are significantly higher than they have been in the last previous 3 to 5 years. So what does that mean for you? If you have been in your house from probably 2019 to 2023, if you're purchasing now, it's going to be significantly different. If you're about 3% interest rate, or you're one of the lucky ones that got the 2% or whatever that was, great for you. You have some super sweet options available. If you're going to purchase now, you're at probably a 6%, possibly 7%, who knows what's going to happen. That's going to change your options a little bit. So moving could be an option for you if you're at the higher interest rate. Remodeling could be an option for you. And we're gonna kind of break those down of what that looks like, moving versus remodeling. So at a $300,000 house right now, your payment's probably roughly $1,200 if your house is at a 3% interest rate. If you jump that same exact house today, that's $300,000, you're going to be looking at somewhere in the $1,800 to $2,000 range. So your monthly payment is significantly different. So if you're going to move, you gotta kind of think about that. You gotta factor that into those moving plans. That does not include your closing costs. That doesn't include moving costs. That doesn't include the time and the headache of trying to find a house, win a bid on a house. I have tons of friends, and I'm sure you have had friends that have put in tons of offers on houses and not got the one they wanted, and the emotional roller coaster that is trying to buy a house in 2023. So over the life of that 30-year loan, if you're getting a 30-year mortgage at that 6% interest rate, you're going to be paying an extra $228,000. And your head kind of starts to spin at that point because you don't normally look at that. You just look at your monthly payment. So an interest rate difference, 3 to 6%, is significant when you're talking the life of a loan. So if you're looking at remodeling, one of the great options out there right now is a HELOC. So if you have some equity in your house, you can get a HELOC right now around 8%. So what that 8% means is as you draw on the total, let's say it's $100,000, as you draw on that total, you pay interest only on what you've drawn. So if you take out $20,000 to pay your first installment of that project, you're just paying the interest, the 8% interest on that $20,000. If you are setting up that HELOC, there is some fees involved. So probably an appraisal and some other things like that. Normally costs anywhere from $250 to $750, could be higher, could be lower, just depends on your bank and your space that you're looking at. So you're saying you're going to take out $100,000. That's just an easy figure, a round number for us to kind of put in the calculator here. So if you do that, you take all the $100,000 out, that's going to be adding a $600 payment to your mortgage already. So you're kind of in the close low end range total wise if you were at the 6% interest rate. But the amazing thing that the HELOC has is you can refinance that into your loan at a later date. So let's say we're in 2023, 2024 is an election year. Who knows what's going to happen? It seems to be the track record that interest rates go down in an election year. So you could do that this year for the next 6 months. You'd hold that loan, that HELOC, for 6 months. You go into next year, maybe the interest rates drop to 5%. Maybe they drop to 4%. Who knows? You can refinance that $100,000 in the HELOC into your house, and it bumps your mortgage just a little bit, rather than moving, having all the additional fees, all that come into play, not knowing what's going to happen, and then you refinance. There's tons of questions that you kind of have to work through when you're looking at doing either one. If you take up to that full 8-year term to pay off that HELOC, you're only going to be paying $64,000 in interest rather than, we talked about mortgage, 6%, you're going to be $228,000 over the life of that. Obviously, it's a shortened timeline, so we understand that, but if you're adding it up, that could be a big difference. What are different types of financing mechanisms for this type of remodel? So if you were going to be doing a remodel, we already talked about the HELOC or the home equity line of credit. What is that? It basically means you are borrowing on the value or the equity that you've created in your home. So let's say you have been in your house for 10 years and you bought it for $300,000 and you've paid a certain amount of that down, and hopefully that house is appreciated in value, and you can typically be lent with a home equity line of credit depending on your credit. You can be lent up to 90, sometimes 85% of the whole home's value. So you have some kind of gap room to play in there to get that money out in a HELOC. The other option is cash out refinancing. So we kind of talked about it with the HELOC. You've been in your house for a little while, you've paid down that mortgage, and your value hopefully has gone up. You can take that gap between what you bought it for and what the value is, and you can refinance that loan, and you basically close the gap and you take that cash out. That way you can use that cash kind of as you want, basically. The difference between that and a HELOC is at the end of that, you are refinancing that. So that loan now becomes that big, whereas you're paying a less interest rate on the HELOC compared to the cash out refinance. There's other options too. They're called renovation loans or an FHA 203K loan. You can Google that one later if you want. The other option is personal savings. A lot of our clients do this. They use their hard-earned money that they've been saving for a long time to buy a kitchen, to invest in their house, to invest in their bathroom. This is obviously, in a dream world, everybody could do this, but that's why we're talking about other options. So if your house is completely in need of something, there's these other options to make that happen. Then the other is private lending. The downside of this is normally the interest rates quite higher. So a lot of contractors offer this kind of personal financing basically through a separate venue that's not really attached to standard banks. So you can do this for siding, roofing, all of these type of things, but your interest rate's probably going to be north of 10%. So it's going to be a little bit harder to get, and your payment's going to be a little bit higher. So that's why we didn't really highlight that, and we don't currently offer that at Carlson Projects because we feel like our other options are better at this point. All right, let's talk about the pros and cons of remodeling or moving. Let's just jump in and let's tell you all of the cons of remodeling. We're a remodeling company, but we're going to tell you what are the downsides of remodeling. Whether we like it or not, we are going to be in your space. We're going to be disrupting your life. So if you are not comfortable with other people being in your house, I mean, we're pretty nice, but if you're not comfortable with that and you're not comfortable with the disruption and your house being torn apart for a fairly significant amount of time, remodeling might not be for you. The added stress of doing a remodel might not be worth it to you. Number two, uncertain outcomes. No matter how good we are at our job, no matter how good another general contractor is at their job, no matter how good a plumber or electrician is at their job, when you're remodeling something, sometimes things don't go as planned. Sometimes you open up a wall and you have a pipe that's been leaking for 20 years and you had no idea and you got to fix it. Sometimes you have electrical issues that you have to fix. You probably should fix those anyways, but we can't guarantee that this isn't going to happen. So if the fear of the unknown is too much for you, that might be a reason why you move. Pass it on to the next guy. Number 3 is limited options. No matter how much I want to believe that that's not possible, because I am a designer at heart and I want to make sure things fit and function for you, we'll move any wall, try and figure out how to make this the best space. There's still barriers to make those things happen sometimes. Sometimes it's not worth the extra expense to knock down that load-bearing wall. Sometimes there's a plumbing pipe in the way that would require us to completely remodel the entire house. We don't want that to happen, but that is a con that could happen, is you're building within a box a lot of times, and sometimes you can't design out bad things. Remodeling pros. Well, the thing we love to talk about is, number 1 is personalization. I think that's the most fun and unique part about what we do, is we get to design in the way that you would want to have it done. A lot of times when you're doing a new construction or you're moving, you don't have that decision unless you're going completely custom with a new built house. A lot of times we can put fun things in to a remodel that's not going to cost an arm and a leg. That is one of my favorite things, is being able to take clients to those places, pick out tile, whatever, that really lights up their soul. That's a super exciting part of in a pro for remodeling. Number 2, we've kind of talked about it, that's what this is all about, is the financing mechanisms. In 2023, you're going to have a few more options, in our opinion, to do stuff when you're remodeling rather than getting something new. Increased value to your property. Regardless of what you're going to do to the property, it should increase the value. If you have an atrocious kitchen, if you have a terrible bathroom and you make it nicer, people like nice things. So will it add insane amounts of value? Maybe. Depends on that person that's going to come after you. It's also dependent on you. We always talk about remodeling for you, not for the next person. We've done it in houses where a kitchen has just been remodeled. I know, close your ears. A kitchen has just been remodeled and done, and we come in and completely remodel the whole thing again because it didn't fit that person. They wanted something different. So think when you're going to remodel about you, and we will implement things to say, okay, maybe that's a little too off the wall. Let's think about this. If that's still what you want and your heart desires, let's go for it. Number 4 is emotional attachment to a home. I can attest to this. I've lived through a fire and remodeled a house. There's things that you can't build into a new house. So if you have an emotional attachment with that house, a remodel is probably going to make sense for you, because it's hard to sever those ties sometimes. And last but not least, a remodeling pro is cost effectiveness. Sometimes this can be less than all of the factors to make a move happen. Sometimes it can be, and sometimes it can't be. It's going to depend on your situation. If there's going to be something that we have to completely redo just to get a bathroom to function, it may be more expensive. If it is a thing where your house is newer and we just kind of have to plug and play, as we say, we just take fixtures out and put fixtures back in, that could be in a cost-effective way rather than having to move, finding a mover, paying all the fees to move, paying your realtor fees, all of that stuff adds up. So cost effectiveness could be a good pro for you. Relocating or moving cons. We've kind of talked about them a little bit, but number 1 is the financial implications of moving. Closing costs, fees from the bank, realtor fees, moving, the just amount of money that it costs to just wrap your things up, get boxes for your things, figure out how to get them to the next place, hire somebody to move that annoying piano that you got from your grandma, that you have to figure out how to get to the next place. All of those things can be cons for moving. Number 2 is emotional attachment. We talked about that for a pro for remodeling. If you have a deep attachment to a place that you're in, it's kind of hard sometimes to rip the Band-Aid off and move. The other thing is it's time consuming and exhausting. I don't know about you, but I hate moving. I don't know anybody that is in their right mind that's like, I love moving. Other than because you get to downsize your junk a little bit because you're just gonna start throwing away stuff. But moving can be seriously exhausting. If you have young kids, even more exhausting. The number 4 one is potential for unexpected stuff. That can happen when you are moving, especially if you're buying a new house, or especially if you're buying a house that is previously owned. You can do all the inspections you want, but sometimes there is a roof leak. Sometimes the furnace is on its last leg and you had no idea. Sometimes the water heater was about to go out and the inspector didn't know it and the plumber didn't know it, the homeowner didn't know it, and you're gonna be stuck with that bill. The unknown of that might be a con to you of, okay, what is that going to mean for us financially? Where we know all the issues in our current house. We know that that water heater is about done. We know that that furnace is about done. So we can kind of plan for those things rather than move into a new house, set up shop, and we don't have hot water. So think about those things when you're going to relocate. The other thing to think about is neighbors. Whether we like it or not, neighbors make the neighborhood, so to speak. You can have amazing neighbors, you can have horrible neighbors, and that is going to drastically impact your life in day to day. So don't discount that. All right, the pros for moving or relocating. A fresh start. I mean, who doesn't want a clean slate? Who doesn't want to start a new adventure? I get that. That's super fun. The other thing is access to new amenities or different things that you may have not had at your current house. So if you're moving to a newer neighborhood, it could be a school, it could be a church, it could be your favorite restaurant, you're within walking distance for your favorite bakery. All of those things could be huge pros to relocating. Potential for improved house. Maybe you're buying a newer house than you have now. Maybe you have a 1950s house and your aluminum wire electrical is falling apart and you're trying to figure out how to do it. How nice would it be to have a house from 2005 and everything is close to up to code? I mean, all of that stuff is a factor. You know, you could have, you now have a primary suite instead of you all share a bathroom together. I mean, that is definitely a pro of moving. Last but not least, you don't have the stress of remodeling. You don't have the stress of finding a general contractor and going through that mess that it can be. You know, can I trust this person in my house? Do I know that they're going to do a good job? Can I trust what they say is going to be a good thing or not? That is stressful. And we try and recognize that here at Carlson Projects, but it is a thing that is part of a remodel. All right, as you are thinking about this, know that there's no one right answer to this. This is very individual. It depends on who you are, who your family is, who you want to be, who your family wants to be, where your family is, where your extended family is. All of these things factor in. Finances, like you have to think about all of these pros, all of these cons. And I would highly encourage, if you are thinking about doing both, if you're thinking about remodeling, if you're thinking about relocating, is to reach out to different avenues. Reach out to a bank and say, okay, hey, here's what I'm thinking about. Reach out to a general contractor. Say, okay, we're thinking about this. Can you give me a rough ballpark? You know, even if it's a $30,000 swing, can you give me a rough ballpark of what a kitchen remodel would cost? They're probably going to ask you, or they should, ask you a ton of questions to be able to kind of come up with that ballpark. But it will be helpful information in your gathering phase. Same thing with a banker. Reach out to multiple banks, call a couple around and ask questions. If somebody can answer your questions or give you at least an idea of what the things were going to cost and what potential outcomes could look like, that should be your bank. That will give you a ton of information. The biggest part in making this type of decision is don't count the other person out, in my opinion. Communicate around what you're feeling and what you're thinking and what you would want your future to be. If you don't do this, you could move and you look at your spouse or your partner and they're like, why did we go through this? Why did we make this decision to remodel? Why did we make this decision to move? And I want to try and save that. I'm being the Carlson Project's therapist right now. Like, how do you communicate what you want to do? I don't think that can be understated enough, is communicate what you ultimately want and kind of struggle through that process and come to a conclusion together and figure it out. So I hope this was helpful. If you found it helpful, please shoot us a DM. Please message us and say this was super helpful. Thank you.